I can't stand you. The house is sold. Pack up and get out. I read the sentence twice before I felt anything. The note was placed precisely in the center of our marble kitchen island as if it were part of the decor. The ink was still dark. Beside it sat a half-empty glass of red wine. There was a faint lipstick mark on the rim. Not my shade. The dishwasher hummed softly behind me. The house looked exactly the same as it had that morning: white cabinets, stainless steel appliances, the faint smell of lemon cleaner. Suburban Seattle, quiet, controlled, ordinary. Except it wasn't. I set my purse down and stood very still. I've learned something about shock over the years. It arrives loud, but it doesn't have to move you. My son was at my mother's house. I had dropped him off 15 minutes earlier with the excuse that I needed to run errands. I already knew something was wrong before I even opened the front door. I just didn't know it would be this theatrical. The house is sold. That was the line that almost made me laugh. We were both on the mortgage, both on the deed. Washington is a community property state. You don't just sell a house without your spouse's signature. Not legally. I reached for the note and turned it over. The paper was thick, torn from a legal pad. Mark had always liked props, grand gestures, final lines delivered like he was ending a scene in a movie. He thought this was his exit. I uncapped a black permanent marker from the junk drawer. My hand didn't shake. I wrote 2 words in deliberate block letters across the back. Signature fraud. I let the ink dry for a second, then placed the paper back exactly where he had left it, aligned with the marble veining, perfectly centered. Then I took out my phone. I didn't call him. I opened my email instead. 6 months ago, when I first noticed the Tiffany charge, I didn't confront him. I built a file. It started small: $1,842 at a boutique hotel in Miami. Then another business dinner with no receipt. Rideshare charges at 1:17 a.m. I work in operations analytics for a regional healthcare network. Patterns are my profession. When the pattern shifted, I didn't cry. I tracked. Then came the requests. Can you DocuSign this real quick? It's just for insurance. They need your ID uploaded again. He rushed me every time. He hovered. He insisted it was nothing. I signed nothing without saving copies. 3 weeks ago, I noticed something different in the subject lines: escrow update, title documents, property disclosure. He thought he'd been clever, funneling communications through a shared account he assumed I ignored. He underestimated boredom. I read everything. The house wasn't sold. It was pending. Escrow had opened. The buyer was moving quickly. But the file required both signatures. Mine hadn't been properly verified. The DocuSign audit trail showed inconsistencies, timestamps that didn't match my login history, an IP address that traced back to Mark's office. I forwarded the entire chain to my private email weeks ago. Tonight, after reading his note, I forwarded it again, this time to someone else. Subject line: urgent, potential signature fraud. Recipient: escrow officer, title company compliance department, CC myself. I attached screenshots of the audit trail and wrote 3 calm sentences explaining that my signature had not been authorized and that I was formally disputing any attempted transfer of marital property. I hit send. Then I called the mortgage servicer and requested a flag on the account due to a legal dispute. The representative asked routine questions. I answered them clearly. I requested confirmation numbers. I wrote them down. After that, I texted my attorney. Need emergency consult. Attempted property sale without consent. Have documentation. She replied within 5 minutes. Come in first thing tomorrow. I looked at the wine glass again. Lipstick, cheap coral pink, not mine. Mark liked control. He liked deciding when something ended. He liked believing that silence meant weakness. My phone vibrated. Mark. I let it ring. It rang again. And again. I flipped the phone over on the counter and watched the ceiling for a moment. The house felt hollow now. Not empty, just exposed. Like the walls were waiting to see who would blink first. Another call. Then another. When the vibration finally stopped, I turned the phone back over. 12 missed calls. I slid it into my purse. He hadn't read it yet. But he would. And when he did, he would understand something very clearly. He hadn't sold the house. He had just sold himself. Mark read the words an hour later. I know because the calls didn't stop at 12. By the time I pulled into my mother's driveway to pick up my son's overnight bag, my phone had climbed to 28 missed calls, all from him. No texts, just calls. That told me everything I needed to know. He had seen it. Signature fraud. He understood exactly what it meant. I didn't call back. Instead, I sat in my car for a minute longer than necessary, engine idling, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. My mother came to the window with a questioning look. I gave her a small nod to say everything was fine. It wasn't. But she didn't need the details yet. On the drive back to the house, I replayed the last 6 months like I was reviewing security footage. It started with tension about money. Mark's consulting venture. That's what he called it. He'd left a stable management role at a logistics firm to launch something vague and impressive sounding. Strategic growth solutions. It required bridge capital. That was his phrase. Bridge capital. I remember standing at the kitchen sink one evening while he explained it to me like I was the intern. It's temporary, he'd said. Once this lands, we're set. But the bridge kept getting longer. Credit card balances crept up. A HELOC inquiry appeared in our mail. He brushed it off. Just exploring options. I explored too. I created a spreadsheet, quietly. I tagged every charge by category. I flagged the ones that didn't align with his stories. Miami twice. Jewelry once. Dinner receipts that showed 2 entrees and 2 cocktails. Always 2. I didn't confront him. Confrontation would have forced him to adapt. Instead, I watched. 3 weeks ago, when the first escrow notification slipped into the shared inbox, I almost admired the audacity. Subject opening escrow 2718 Crestview Lane. Our address. He hadn't told me the house was listed. There had been no sign in the yard, no staging consultations, no discussions about timing. Our son's school was 3 blocks away. But there it was, a digital paper trail. He must have assumed I ignored those emails the way I ignored his half-hearted, "How was your day?" questions. The DocuSign audit log was what sealed it. When you sign electronically, there's a digital footprint, IP address, timestamp, device type. Mine showed a signature completed at 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. At 2:14 p.m. that Tuesday, I was in a conference room at Swedish Medical Center presenting a quarterly operations review. I had the calendar invite to prove it. 23 attendees. Slide deck archived. Badge scan at the hospital entrance. Mark had used my stored signature. He must have thought the system wouldn't check too closely. He didn't understand how compliance departments think. Tonight, after he read those 2 words, he would be replaying that same audit trail in his head. At 36 missed calls, he left a voicemail. "Clara, call me, right now. You're overreacting." Overreacting. I almost smiled. At 41 missed calls, another voicemail. "We can fix this. Don't do anything stupid." Don't do anything stupid. At 49, his tone changed. "Please, just pick up." By the time I parked outside the house, the counter read 52. 52 missed calls. I sat there in the dark for a moment, looking at the glowing number on my screen. 52 attempts to regain control. 52 reminders that he hadn't expected resistance. I stepped inside. The house was silent. No music. No television. The wine glass was gone. The note was still on the counter, but it had been moved slightly, just enough to show it had been handled. On the back, the ink from my marker had bled faintly through the paper. Signature fraud. I imagined the moment he saw it. The split second where arrogance turns into calculation. He knew escrow would freeze the file if a dispute was filed. He knew lenders don't ignore fraud flags. He knew his bridge capital depended on that sale closing cleanly. And he knew I wasn't bluffing. My phone vibrated again. Call number 53. I declined it. Then I opened my laptop. If he wanted to play theatrics, that was his weakness. I preferred documentation. By 9:12 the next morning, the file was frozen. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to threaten anyone. I simply showed up with timestamps. My attorney's office was on the 12th floor of a glass building overlooking Elliott Bay. Clean lobby, neutral art. The kind of place where people speak in measured tones and everything is documented twice. Mark had left 7 more voicemails overnight. The last one came at 2:03 a.m. Clara, don't escalate this. Escalate. As if I'd started something. I sat across from Diane Keller, mid-50s, precise haircut, no wasted words. I laid out printed emails, DocuSign audit trails, calendar logs proving I wasn't present when I signed, and a copy of the note he left on the counter. She read silently for a full 2 minutes. Then she looked up. He thought you wouldn't check the audit trail. I did. She nodded once. Good. We drafted a formal notice of dispute citing suspected electronic signature fraud under Washington state law and requested immediate hold of escrow pending investigation. Diane attached the evidence and sent it directly to the escrow officer and title company compliance department while I was sitting there. No drama, no threats. Just a time-stamped paper trail. At 9:12 a.m., the escrow officer replied, "Transaction temporarily suspended pending review." Suspended. That word did more damage to Mark's plans than anything I could have said to his face. Diane then prepared an emergency filing requesting a temporary restraining order, preventing transfer or encumbrance of marital property without mutual consent. It was procedural, clean, boring even, but devastating. At 9:37 a.m., my phone lit up again. Mark. I let it ring. Diane glanced at the screen and didn't comment. At 9:41, the lender's fraud prevention department emailed me confirming they had flagged the loan file and initiated internal review. At 9:44, escrow called. I answered this one. The officer's voice was careful, professional. We've received documentation indicating potential irregularities with the electronic signature. We are obligated to suspend closing until the matter is resolved. I understand, I said calmly. I did not authorize any signature. We'll need a written affidavit. You'll have it within the hour. When I hung up, Diane handed me a draft. Sign this, she said, the real one. I signed. On paper. Ink, date, witnessed. By 10:15 a.m., the affidavit was sent. By 10:32, the buyer's agent had emailed both of us asking what was happening. The tone was polite, but tense. People do not like surprises in escrow. By 10:47, Mark called again. I stepped into the hallway this time and answered. Silence on the line for half a second. Then his voice tight. What did you do? I disputed a fraudulent signature. It wasn't fraud. You signed my name. I had authority. No, you didn't. A pause. You're blowing this up over nothing. Selling our house without consent isn't nothing. You knew we needed the capital. For your bridge. His breathing shifted. You're making this impossible. That's the point. Silence again. Then softer. We can fix this without lawyers. It's already with lawyers. The shift in his tone after that was subtle but unmistakable. Panic. Clara, listen to me. If this falls apart, it already has. You'll ruin everything. No, I said quietly. You did. He hung up first. Not out of control. Out of calculation. I went back into Diane's office and sat down. Escrow is suspended, I told her. She nodded. Good. I looked at the clock. Not even noon. The house wasn't sold. It was frozen in place. Exactly where it needed to be. Mark didn't come home that night. He texted once around 6. We need to talk. I didn't respond. By then, escrow had formally marked the file, on hold, pending legal review. The lender's fraud unit had requested additional documentation. The buyer's agent had stopped emailing me and started emailing attorneys instead. The sale wasn't dead yet, But it wasn't alive either. That was enough. The next morning, I scheduled a licensed moving crew for 1 p.m. I used my own credit card. I made sure the invoice listed items as personal property removal. I was not going to hand Mark an argument about vandalism. At 12:52 p.m., the truck pulled into the driveway. 2 men in navy shirts stepped out, professional, efficient, no curiosity in their eyes, just work. I walked them through the house with a clipboard. This rug goes, the dining table goes, that bookshelf, the art in the hallway, the espresso machine. Everything in the master closet that's mine. They nodded and began wrapping furniture in thick pads. I didn't touch the walls. I didn't touch the light fixtures. I didn't touch the hardwood floors I had paid extra to upgrade 5 years ago. Fixtures stay. Personal property goes. That's the rule. By 1:40, the living room felt larger, emptier. The couch that Mark used to sprawl across during late-night sports broadcasts was gone. The framed family photos I had ordered every Christmas were boxed and labeled. In the kitchen, I emptied cabinets with precision. My cookware, my small appliances, the flatware set my mother gave us as a wedding gift. I left his grill tools, his whiskey decanter. On the counter, the marble gleamed uninterrupted. I reset the smart home hub before unplugging it, removed myself as primary administrator, changed passwords on every shared account tied to my email, streaming services, utility portals, cloud storage. No sabotage. Just boundaries. At 2:18 p.m., a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Mark stepped out before the engine fully stopped. He took in the moving truck first, then the open garage, then the absence. "What is this?" he demanded, walking toward me. "Personal property removal," I said evenly. "You're stripping the house." "I'm taking what I purchased." He moved past me into the living room and stopped. The echo startled him. His voice bounced slightly off bare walls. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being organized." He ran a hand through his hair and let out a sharp breath. "You froze escrow." "Yes." "You called the lender." "Yes." "You could have talked to me." "I did." When you handed me a note and told me to get out." His jaw tightened. "You didn't have to escalate it." "I didn't escalate it. I corrected it." The movers carried the last of my boxes down the driveway. One of them asked quietly, "All set?" "Yes," I said. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're going to destroy my company over this." "I'm protecting my legal interest." "You always have to win." I held his gaze. "This isn't about winning." "What is it about?" "Consent." He laughed once, hollow. "You think you're so righteous." "I think I don't like being forged." That landed. He looked away first. The house behind him felt unfamiliar now. Without furniture, without the rhythm of family noise, it resembled a model home waiting for buyers. Except no one was coming. I signed the moving invoice on the hood of my car. The driver handed me a carbon copy. "Where to?" he asked. "Storage unit for now," I said. Not a new house. Not a dramatic escape. Just a step. As the truck pulled away, Mark stood in the driveway staring at the open front door. The marble counter inside was visible from where I stood. The note was still there. He hadn't thrown it away. He hadn't dared. I picked up my overnight bag and slid into my car. "You're overreacting," he called out one last time. I rolled the window down just enough to answer. "No," I said calmly, "I'm responding." Then I drove away. He read it again after the house was empty. I know, because that was when the calls turned desperate. The moving truck had barely pulled into the storage facility when my phone began vibrating again. Not spaced out this time. Rapid. Consecutive. No pauses long enough to breathe. I sat in my car and watched the screen light up. Mark. 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 He wasn't calling to argue anymore. He was calling because the illusion had collapsed. When he'd stormed into the house earlier and seen the living room stripped down to bare space, he had still been angry. Angry men believe anger is leverage. But now he was alone in that echoing kitchen staring at the note he'd written. He would have flipped it over again. He would have stared at those 2 words like they were radioactive. Signature fraud. That wasn't a threat. It wasn't an insult. It was a category. It meant lenders. It meant compliance officers. It meant potential criminal exposure if things escalated. It meant he had underestimated the one person who knew exactly how systems respond to irregularities. The phone kept ringing. At call number 27, he left another voicemail. Clara, don't file anything else. I'll pull the listing. I'll cancel escrow. He couldn't cancel escrow. Not cleanly, not once fraud review was initiated. By 34, his voice had lost its edge. Okay, I messed up. Just answer. By 41, he sounded smaller. Please. I didn't pick up. Instead, I opened my email. There it was. Subject immediate review, signature authentication required. From the title company's compliance team, they had initiated a signature verification process and requested in-person identity confirmation from both parties before any further action. That meant delay. Delay meant buyers getting nervous. Nervous buyers meant leverage disappearing. Another call. 48. 49. 50. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the storage unit, my heels clicking against concrete. I unlocked the roll-up door and watched the movers stack the last of the labeled boxes. Domestic inventory reduced to cardboard. My phone vibrated again. 51. I let it. The driver closed the unit and handed me the lock. Everything's in, he said. Thank you. As he drove away, the phone buzzed one more time. 52. I looked at the screen. 52 missed calls, all from Mark. He wasn't used to being ignored. He wasn't used to not being able to control the narrative. I finally opened one voicemail at random. His breathing filled the speaker before words did. If this gets reported beyond escrow, I could lose everything. There it was. Not we. I could lose everything. I locked the storage unit and leaned against the metal door. He wasn't afraid of losing the house. He was afraid of losing status, reputation, his carefully constructed image of competence. I typed one text. Communicate through counsel. Then I turned the phone to silent. 52 calls didn't mean he loved me. They meant he was cornered. And cornered men reveal who they really are. I drove back toward the house once more, not to reconcile, not to argue, but to retrieve one last box from the garage, our son's bike. As I turned into the driveway, Mark's car was parked crookedly near the curb. He was standing in the open garage staring at nothing. When he saw me, he straightened. You didn't have to go nuclear, he said, voice raw. I didn't. This could ruin me. You signed my name. He ran both hands over his face. I was going to fix it. After you closed. Silence. That was answer enough. He took a step closer. Clara, please, just withdraw it. I met his eyes. No. He looked past me at the street as if searching for a way out that didn't involve accountability. There wasn't one. I lifted the bike into the back of my car. When I shut the trunk, the sound echoed through the hollow house. It sounded final. The real confrontation didn't happen until 2 days later. By then, the buyer had formally withdrawn. Escrow sent a neutral statement: transaction terminated due to unresolved signature dispute. Neutral language, devastating outcome. Mark's bridge capital evaporated in a single line of administrative text. I was at the house one last time to meet a locksmith. My attorney had advised changing the locks immediately, not out of spite, but out of caution. There were too many digital access points already compromised, too many passwords shared under the illusion of trust. The locksmith worked quietly, kneeling at the front door while I stood on the driveway, reviewing a stack of printed documents, title correspondence, lender confirmations, a copy of the affidavit I had signed. Mark's car pulled in hard enough to make gravel pop. He stepped out before the engine cut. Are you serious right now? He snapped. The locksmith glanced up, then returned to his work. Professionals learn quickly not to involve themselves. You terminated the sale, Mark said, striding toward me. The buyer walked. I know. Do you understand what that cost me? Yes. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. You destroyed my deal. No, I said evenly. Your forged signature destroyed your deal. He stopped 3 feet from me. It wasn't forged. You signed my name. I had implied authority. You had assumption. He exhaled through his teeth. You're enjoying this. That almost made me smile. No. Then, what is this? He demanded, gesturing toward the door. The locksmith, the papers in my hand. This is what happens when someone violates consent. Consent, he repeated like the word offended him. You don't get to move assets out from under me because your startup is bleeding. His jaw tightened. You don't even understand the pressure I'm under. I understand it perfectly, I said. You needed liquidity. You thought selling the house without telling me was easier than admitting you were failing. His eyes flickered. There it was, the crack. He lowered his voice. I was going to replace the funds. With what? He didn't answer. The locksmith stood up. All set, he said quietly. New keys, rekeyed deadbolt and garage entry. Thank you, I replied. Mark stared at the fresh hardware on the door. You changed the locks? Yes. This is my house. It's marital property. He stepped closer, anger flaring again. You can't just lock me out. I didn't. I changed the lock. You'll get a key through counsel. Through counsel, he repeated, incredulous. Yes. His phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced down, then back at me. Compliance wants another statement, he muttered. I know. They're asking about device access. I documented mine. His expression shifted, not rage, not exactly fear, but realization. You were building a case. I was protecting myself. You never trusted me. I didn't need to, I said calmly. I verified. That landed harder than anything else. He took a step back as if the driveway had tilted. For the first time since this started, he looked less like a man in control and more like someone who had miscalculated the room. This could follow me, he said quietly. Background checks, future lenders. Actions have records, I replied. He rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't think you'd go this far. You didn't think I'd read the audit trail. Silence hung between us. A neighbor across the street pretended to water shrubs while watching the exchange. Mark glanced at her, then at the locksmith truck pulling away. You've made your point, he said finally. This wasn't about making a point. Then what? I looked at the house. At the blank windows. At the marble counter visible through the front entry. It was about not disappearing, I said. He didn't respond. Because he understood. I got into my car with the new keys resting in my palm. As I started the engine, he called my name once. Not angry. Not pleading. Just uncertain. I didn't roll the window down. I drove away. The email arrived 3 days later. Subject internal review. Immediate response required. It wasn't addressed to me. It was forwarded accidentally, I suspect, from Mark's work account to the shared inbox he had forgotten to disconnect. Corporate compliance had opened an inquiry. They weren't accusing him of a crime. Not yet. They were asking questions. Please clarify circumstances surrounding disputed electronic signature. Were company devices used in personal financial transactions? Provide timeline of events. Mark called twice that afternoon. I didn't answer. Diane did. She left him a measured voicemail reminding him all communication regarding the property and any related financial matters should proceed through counsel. Her tone was surgical. That night, I picked up our son from my mother's house and drove to the apartment I had rented month to month. 2 bedrooms, neutral carpet, nothing dramatic. Practical. Our son asked once, "Are we moving?" For now, I said, just until things settle. He nodded. Children accept transitions faster than adults if you don't infect them with panic. Later, after he was asleep, I checked my phone. Mark had texted. They're suspending me pending review. No anger, no theatrics, just fact. I stared at the screen for a moment before locking it again. Suspension wasn't termination, but it wasn't stability either. The next morning, escrow formally closed the file as terminated, signature dispute. The buyer requested release of earnest money. It was processed without incident. Clean paper trail. The house wasn't sold. It also wasn't marketable anymore, not without a reputation repair and joint signatures. Mark called again that afternoon. This time I answered. His voice was flat. They're letting me go. I waited. They said the risk exposure was too high. I'm sorry you're losing your job, I said honestly. He exhaled slowly. You're not sorry. I'm not happy about it, but I'm not responsible for it either. You think I deserve this. I think actions have consequences. There was a long silence. I was trying to build something, he said quietly. At my expense. At our expense, he corrected weakly. You removed me from the equation. He didn't argue that. I thought if I could close the sale fast enough, I could pay everything back. Before you noticed, he admitted. You thought I wouldn't check. I didn't think you'd turn it into a case file. I didn't want to, I said. You made it one. His breathing grew heavier through the line. The woman in Miami, I said calmly. Was she part of the bridge capital? Another silence. That's not relevant. It is to me. He didn't deny it. That was enough. Clara, he said after a moment, voice stripped of its edge. What happens now? Now we separate finances formally. We list the house properly if that's what we decide. We divide assets transparently. And us. I looked around the small apartment living room. Cardboard boxes still stacked near the wall. A lamp casting soft light. My son's backpack resting against the couch. You wrote the ending when you left the note, I said. I was angry. You were careless. He didn't correct me. I didn't think you'd fight, he admitted. I didn't think I'd have to. That truth settled between us. He sounded smaller now, not defeated, but aware. I never wanted to hurt you, he said. I believe that I replied. But you did. The call ended without resolution. No screaming. No apology. Just acknowledgement. Revenge, I realized, wasn't loud. It was precise. And it didn't require cruelty to be effective. 6 weeks later, the house went back on the market. Properly. Joint signatures, transparent listing, no shortcuts. Mark and I stood on opposite sides of the same conference table at Diane's office to sign the agreement. The air between us was different now. Not warm, not hostile, just measured. He looked thinner, quieter. Unemployed officially, consulting contracts on hold, reputation bruised. The Miami situation had evaporated quickly once the money did. I didn't take everything. That's the part people don't expect. Under Washington law, we could have battled for months over percentages, contributions, reimbursements. We had 10 years of mortgage payments, renovation receipts, credit statements, documented income. Instead, we agreed. We calculated the equity after fees, subtracted the HELOC balance he'd opened without telling me yes, I'd found that too. Subtracted attorney fees related directly to the fraudulent signature incident. What remained was divided evenly. Fair. Cold. Clean. Mark signed without theatrics this time. When we left the building, he paused near the elevator. I never thought it would end like this, he said quietly. Neither did I. I was drowning, he admitted. I didn't know how to tell you. You could have tried honesty. He nodded once.